Welcome back to the Mayorverse, everybody. Mayor Reynolds, aka Midnight Mayor here, and today we are talking about Starsiege Deadzone. This is an upcoming, kind of returning FPS, and it is a procedurally generated extraction shooter. You all know that extraction shooters are super hot right now. I have a whole other channel dedicated to Dead Drop, which is my main focus as a creator right now, and I plan to be for the next decade. So come subscribe to me over there, Midnight Mayor, over on YouTube. Help us on over there to catch all my videos. But today we're talking about Starsiege Deadzone. So Starsiege was originally an FPS franchise from the 90s, the throwback, the glory days of 1990 FPS, right? But it's back now. It's being brought back by Prophecy Games, and it has an interesting story behind it. But Prophecy Games is a spin-off of Hi-Rez. They were once part of Hi-Rez. They have now spun off into their own independent studio. If you don't know who Hi-Rez are, they're the makers of a lot of games you may have heard of, like Smite, like Paladins, like Rogue Company, and I have a lot of thoughts on Hi-Rez and their games in general, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as I give my impressions of Starsiege Deadzone. So Starsiege Deadzone, as I said, if you take in this gameplay from the recent alpha test, which I streamed, is a procedurally generated extraction shooter. And this is very interesting because extraction shooters are big right now. Everybody's trying new things. Everybody's trying to get in on this rush to make an extraction shooter, to cash in on it, just like the battle royale craze before it and the mobile craze before that. Extraction shooters are now it. And the procedurally generated element sounds really fun to me, and that's what really drew me to this. You know, the graphics are decent. It's got a cool style, as you can see. They've nailed during this alpha. The art is good. They've got their own style. They've got all the good pieces in place, and that procedurally generated thing really interested me, because that's, you know, extraction shooters in general. The whole point is every run is different, because you got PvE, you got PvE being PvE, PvP, both being blended, right? That's the whole interesting thing. In some games, you can't even tell who's an enemy and who is a player, so to speak. In this game, you can, by the way. So the basic enemies of the game are kind of robots. It's kind of in a space-themed future in which these robots are a big threat, these AI. But there's also other players out there raiding, like there is in most other extraction shooters. And the maps are procedurally generated, meaning they're randomly generated, which should add even more replay value to this game, to Starsiege Deadzone. And as you see when you first drop into the game, the maps are very corridor-based, and that makes sense for a procedurally generated game, right? Most procedurally generated games, it's a very interesting concept, but you can really only do so much. And this one, it almost has a horror vibe to it. It's space, you know, it's the whole space vibe. You're in a ship, it's very dark, it's dimly lit. There's these enemy AIs who are coming to life right before you to fight you and stop you from extracting or gathering loot and completing your missions. But then there's other players who you're going to run into as well. So I liked everything that I saw coming into this game, and I liked the procedurally generated concept. I like the visuals. I gotta say, though, the gunplay is fine. It feels, you know, Dead Drop, something I love about Dead Drop is that it's much faster paced. There's more finesse. The movement is very, very, very good. The gunplay is great, even in the early state of the game. It allows for high risk, high reward plays. Starsiege Deadzone feels like a lot of the other extraction shooters on the market, meaning it feels very slow, almost clunky. And I'm not sure how much more room there is for these, you know, slower paced extraction games. There's nothing wrong with it, but the weapons don't really feel like they have a lot of weight. The combat is okay. With the PvE combat is okay. You know, shooting the robots is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the procedurally generated thing in the gunplay really comes rearing its head when you get into the PvP, especially because the spaces are procedurally generated. It doesn't really feel like the spaces are built for clever, well-designed PvP battles. You run up and on another player, and you kind of just end up moving back and forth. You might be in a giant square with no items in the room at all, and you're just shooting each other in this giant open space with nothing else. There's just nothing else going on. And that might be exciting. It is random. You don't really have an idea of where to go. Every game, there is a map, of course, in the upper left. But when it comes to the PvP, it just feels... and I hate to say it, there's nothing that feels bad. For an alpha test, there is a lot here. And like all the in-game systems seem to be implemented, you know, weapon mods, and obviously quests, the contracts. You're seeing pop one there in the corner. There's just also nothing that feels amazing, especially the gunplay. And it reminds me of my first takes on the Cycle and then the Cycle Frontier, right? It's like they were almost there, but I knew just playing it that it wasn't going to be enough to keep players really engaged long term, because the core game just wasn't fun enough. It's decent, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just not fun enough. And what have we seen happen with the Cycle Frontier? It's now being shut down, even though it had a decent player base. There's a lot of people who like the Cycle Frontier, but it wasn't enough to keep it going. And that leads me to my next thought, which is the whole Hi-Rez link, the Hi-Rez past, and so on. So Hi-Rez is a studio that I like a lot. They usually have games with great visual styles and a lot of good combat, good mechanics, but for whatever reason, they always, again, seem to be this close, but they can never get over the hump. Whether it's Paladins, whether it's Rogue Company, Realm Royale, they lose their player base pretty quickly, and their games never come back from it because they just can't get over the top. And in my opinion, it's because they try to do too much. They don't try to focus on doing one thing extremely well and then double down on it. Their vision is always bigger than the resources they have. This is my opinion. I respect the devs very, very much. I love playing their games because they're usually a lot of fun. But again, one of my problems is I always play it and I'm like, I'm not sure there's enough here to keep people hooked long term. I always hope that's not the case, but it's just how it ends up being. So as I'm trying out Starsiege Deadzone here, that's what's on my mind is, can they keep players hooked playing their game long term? There's a moment there where I kill a guy with a knife, an actual player. Felt pretty cool, by the way. But is there enough here to keep people hooked on the game long term? The procedurally generated thing does, in theory, take care of that by itself. But from what I've played so far, which of course is limited, because things feel so similar, because they're randomly generated, I'm not sure there is enough to give people that real, true variety game experience that they are hoping for. But on top of that, this developer, Prophecy Games, is working on other Starsiege games, including a whole nother Starsiege extraction shooter, which really worries me. They're trying to make two games in the same genre, and I don't know why they would do that. And I guess they're somewhat linked. I don't quite understand it. It's so concerning to me that instead of focusing on making, it's like they had two great ideas and they couldn't just pick one, so they're gonna do them both. And I don't know how big their studio is, but because they're an independent studio, I'm assuming that they're not all that big. So now they're an independent studio trying to make two games in the same genre. Yes, I'm sure it's going to use a lot of the same assets and sounds and so on. But is that really the right play? It seems to me, again, their eyes are getting too big for their belly kind of thing. And it's extremely concerning. I think the other game is called Starsiege Raiders. And let me pull that one up for you. Okay, here you go. Here's the Twitter accounts. Starsiege Deadzone, a sci-fi hardcore corridor extraction shooter. Claim the dead zone for humanity. 720 followers. Joined March 2023. So pretty new. And again, some people will remember this Starsiege IP, but not a lot. It's essentially a new IP for most gamers these days. Then here is Starsiege Raiders. Starsiege Raiders is a hardcore extraction shooter from Prophecy Games NA. Sign up for the alpha at StarsiegeRaiders.com. You go to StarsiegeRaiders.com, and it's the Starsiege Deadzone website. And I just feel like, again, they're already, it's confusing. They're going to be trying to advertise two different games, which are linked, but separate. And I just wish they would, like, pick a direction and run with it. You know, like, this is too much too fast in my mind. And maybe it'll all work out. I would love for it to all work out, right? Like, I always hope for more good games, more great games. I never want devs to fail. I'm just a little confused by what they're doing, and I think most players are gonna be even more confused, and they're gonna split their fan base or their player base, and I'm just concerned. So that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more previews of upcoming games. Make sure you join us over on the Midnight Mare channel for all of our Dead Drop and Midnight Society coverage. Let me know in the comments what game you'd like me to preview, cover, review next. And if you've played Starsiege, Deadzone, please let me know what you think of it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from more of you and get your thoughts on this. So with that said, Mayor Reynolds, aka Midnight Mare, out. This video is sponsored by G Fuel. Use code MARE at any time to get 20% off your order at G Fuel on gfuel.com or the G Fuel app. Just go to the website, select one of their many, many, many amazing flavors in both tubs, cans, G Fuel hydration, whatever G Fuel products you want. Use code MARE at checkout to get 20% off. I guarantee you, you're gonna feel hyped when you drink G Fuel. Come watch my streams if you need any more evidence of that. Get some G Fuel today. Use code MARE for 20% off. And thanks to G Fuel for sponsoring all of our content.